As the year 2022 comes to a close, it's time for us to take a look back at some of the highlights. This year's travels saw us venturing to new places, expanding our horizons, and overall, it was just a great year full of fun and lasting memories. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy this Motoring Adventures Year in Review 2022. The year began with a long-awaited journey out to Big Bend National Park. The sprawling mountains and desert landscapes that are reminiscent of the desert Southwest are what have captivated me about this area. I made this trip in my formerly owned 2021 Jeep Wrangler Rubicon 4xe that was outfitted with a rooftop tent, a small lift, and 37-inch tires, which made traversing the rough backcountry terrain a breeze. This was my first solo overnight camping adventure where I was off the grid and isolated in one of the most remote areas of the country. I loved this trip so much that it spawned 2 more consecutive trips to the region and kept me yearning for more. A 3-mile hike to the top of Mariscal Canyon, overlooking the Rio Grande over 1,000 feet below, was the icing on the cake. From the Chihuahuan Desert to the Sonoran Desert, my next adventure took me out to Phoenix, Arizona, where I attended the Barrett Jackson Classic Car Auction that is held every year in the nearby city of Scottsdale. I got to spend some quality time with my dad, brothers, and nephew as we checked out some nice rides and got to take a few rides, including catching some air in a Ram TRX and flying through the cones in a Mustang Mach 1. From the Valley of the Sun, I returned back home to the Alamo City, San Antonio, Texas, where a dealership had this beautiful used Snazberry red Jeep Rubicon 392 for sale. Being the curious car fanatic that I am, I couldn't help but check this out, even though it was a little bit out of my price range. Nonetheless, this dealer was happy enough to let me drive this awesome Hemi Jeep, and it was amazingly impressive. For years, I've longed for a Jeep Wrangler Unlimited with an engine that sounded as intimidating as the Jeep itself. And the combination of the 6.4-liter Hemi with a slightly lifted Rubicon is such a thing of beauty. Adding muscle car quickness to a solid axle, locked and loaded Jeep is what car guy and Jeep enthusiast dreams are made of. Not even a month after my first trip ever to Big Bend National Park, I made the roughly 7-hour drive back out to the far southwest corner of Texas to, once again, experience the beautiful remoteness wonder that the Big Bend region of Texas has to offer. This time it would not be a solo adventure. My friend Joey was able to tag along in his own Jeep Wrangler Unlimited Rubicon, and together we camped and explored miles and miles of desert backcountry, both from the comfort of our Jeeps and on foot. We managed to soak in the warm waters of the Boquillas Hot Springs, and we also helped out a lost explorer who happened to get his vehicle stuck in a very desolate area of the park. Had we not been there at that exact place and time, and with the equipment that we had, this person might not have made it out alive. After that final day in the park, we were sent off by this absolutely amazing sunset. It is now early March 2022, and for spring break we decided to head out to Big Bend again. Only this time, my wife Jessica and our 2 daughters, Jasmine and Brooke, who were 11 and 8 years old respectively at the time, would finally be coming along for the ride. Backcountry camping was not going to be as feasible with bringing the family and the unpredictability of the first come, first serve backcountry camping permit system, so this time I decided we would test out the Rubicon 4xe's towing capabilities. So we towed this free solo camper to an RV park located just outside of the park entrance in the town of Terlingua. While not as remote and pristine as my previous campsites, you still felt like you were transported to an entirely different place, and we were still able to see and enjoy a lot of the same unique places that Joey and I had on the previous trip out here. From the deserts of Big Bend to the forests of southeast Texas, here's another awesome night spent on the top of my Jeep. This may have seemed like a calm morning, but I arrived the previous night only to find myself stuck in the mud after just minutes of being off the pavement. Despite not having a winch or traction boards, I managed to get myself unstuck the old-fashioned way by rocking the Jeep back and forth until I was able to drive out of the thick, wet mud. I was in the woods near Kelly's Pond in the Sam Houston National Forest, and this was merely a stopover on my way to Louisiana to pick up a used military trailer called the M1102. I planned to use this trailer as an overlanding rig that would provide a platform to mount a second rooftop tent. The idea here being that in the future I will be able to bring Jessica and the girls along with me to some places that might require a little more than two-wheel drive vehicle to reach. After the mud incident, this trip was pretty much uneventful, but it was a nice drive to a remote area of Louisiana that I had never been before. Any chance at using my rooftop tent I would gladly take. Now that I had an overlanding trailer in my possession, and after our mediocre towing experience with the Jeep Rubicon 4xe, not to mention my dissatisfaction with its long-distance fuel economy in general, I began looking at alternative vehicles. This search led me back to one of my previously owned vehicles, a Ram Power Wagon. The Power Wagon is basically a Jeep Rubicon, but in heavy-duty truck form. It has solid axles, front and rear, and electronic locking differentials, a 4-to-1 transfer case, 410 gears, and an electronic sway bar disconnect. It also includes Bilstein shocks for a superior ride, as well as a Warn Xeon 12,000-pound winch. With such off-road capability and utility, you have yourself an amazing overlanding vehicle that can also be a more practical long-distance traveler given its roominess and level of comfort. It was also just great to be driving a throaty V8 again after nearly 8 months in the hybrid electric 4-cylinder engine. Don't get me wrong, I really did love the powerful drivetrain and uniqueness of the 4xE's power plant, but it just overall wasn't the most ideal vehicle for my purposes. Once I figured out a quick and easy way to mount the Smitty-built rooftop tent onto the M1102, I was off on a quest to pick up some used rock rails to protect the Power Wagon's vulnerable rocker panels. I happened to find this used set of factory rock rails in the city of Longview, Texas, which gave me the opportunity to check out the nearby Barnwell Mountain Recreation Area. This is a beautiful off-road park that has dozens of beautifully wooded trails of all degrees of difficulty and several designated dispersed camping options. Ironically enough, I ended up damaging part of my truck's rocker panel while attempting an off-camber hill climb. I was really bummed about this. After only a couple weeks of ownership, I had already damaged my truck. It could have been prevented had the rock rails, which were the main reason for even taking this trip, had already been installed. As bummed as I was, I did manage to get a good night's sleep underneath the whistling pine trees, but breaking down camp the next morning would be a bit of a challenge. A colony of daddy longlegs spiders managed to crawl their way onto the trailer, and even managed to get onto the tent as I was putting it away. For anyone with any level of arachnophobia, this will give you nightmares. Eventually I was able to put the tent away without getting any spiders inside. It is now April and Easter Sunday 2022, which also happens to be National Mustang Day. My dad and I had the opportunity to visit the Mustang Museum of America on its 58th anniversary of the introduction of the iconic Ford Mustang. Tucked away in the small town of Odenville, Alabama, just outside of Birmingham, this museum has a Mustang representing almost every year from its 1964 introduction to the 2015 50-year anniversary edition, as well as the largest known collection of police Mustangs and other memorabilia. I have not seen a more comprehensive collection of Mustangs like this anywhere else on the planet. It was now May 2022, and I had a real itch to get back into the wild and do some solo remote camping again. This time I decided to hit up the Texas coast and head to Padre Island National Seashore, or just PINS for short. With 60 miles of mostly untamed coastline, marked by sandy beaches that require a four-wheel drive vehicle, PINS has a place where you can find solitude and remoteness like no other in the state of Texas. This was once again a great opportunity to see how well the M1102 and Ram Power Wagon work together for an overlanding type of adventure. Waking up to the sunrise over the Gulf of Mexico is a surreal experience, and made even more so when done in isolation. This beautiful morning rivaled the one I experienced at Big Bend earlier in the year, which I felt was one of the most beautiful mornings I had ever experienced. After exploring a side road taking you to the other side of the island, my goal was to drive the entire 60-mile stretch of coastline down to the Mansfield Channel, which is the borderline between North and South Padre Islands. But unfortunately, I was on a time crunch and only made it to mile marker 25. Despite this, I had such an amazing time on the Texas coast that was like no other trip to the coast I've had before. I'll definitely be making another trip out to hopefully make it the entire length of the island. The middle to latter parts of May and into early June was spent mostly working for Amazon Flex and performing a lot of odds and ends type of activities. I had been laid off from my main job, so I had a lot of extra time on my hands, but not a lot of extra money. The crossbars I had fabricated to mount up the Smitty-built Gen 2 rooftop tent to the M1102 trailer were in need of some much-needed maintenance, and so was the Ram Power Wagon, which was due for an oil change and tire rotation. I also used this time between jobs to finally install a Spalding 54-inch basketball goal that had been sitting in our garage since Christmas of 2021. This time period also was particularly special as the Motoring Ventures YouTube channel finally crossed the 1,000 subscriber mark, and it was very exciting to reach this major milestone. So exciting, in fact, that I decided to give away a small prize to one lucky subscriber in appreciation of their support.
21 Ford Bronco Badlands, 1/18 scale diecast model.
For Father's Day 2022, we joined some friends of ours for some fun in the sun. This is Canyon Lake, which lies roughly 40 miles from both Austin and San Antonio. Built in 1964, the lake's turquoise blue water provided hours of fun for our boat and tube. The girls and I really enjoyed this beautiful day out on the lake, and was an exciting way to celebrate Father's Day. During the month of June, my wife had to make a work trip to her hometown of El Paso for a few days. And with the kids being out of school, I thought it would be a great opportunity for us to take a mini summer road trip to visit her and the rest of the family there. But instead of the usually uneventful 9-hour drive from San Antonio, I decided to make this into a mini overlanding trip by taking a slightly altered route. For the first night, we camped at a little-known campground up in the Davis Mountains of West Texas called the Madera Canyon Dispersed Camping Area. This area is normally just a roadside picnic area, but is also designed as an overnight camping location. The surrounding area was beautiful and secluded off the highway, and it gave you the impression that you were camping somewhere that was miles away from anyone. The girls and I got a decent night's rest despite a vehicle parking in the site next to us at 4 o'clock in the morning, which had me just a little bit concerned. For the next night, I did not know exactly where we would be spending the night, but rather the general direction I wanted to travel, and so we made our way north into southern New Mexico to spend the night in the cooler Sacramento Mountains, not too far from the town of Cloudcroft. This area lies within the Lincoln National Forest, which up until this point was closed for camping because of extremely dry weather conditions that had just reopened thanks to having consecutive days of heavy rainfall. Because of this, the area was extremely wet and the trails were very muddy and slick. After driving down one of the Forest Service roads, we found this nice open area that had a fire ring and a large tree, and we decided to camp here for the night. The next morning, I had planned to continue exploring down this Forest Service road and eventually loop back to the main road that would take us to Cloudcroft and eventually to El Paso. But as the trail made its way slightly upward in elevation, the muddy conditions made the trail pretty much impassable. The mud was so thick that I needed to use the winch to get us to an area that we could turn around, and this was not an easy task with the trailer being attached. We eventually were able to turn around and make our way back the way we came. Soon after getting back to pavement, we aired up the tires and finally made our way to El Paso. Another incredible experience that I won't soon forget. For the 4th of July weekend, 2022, with family visiting from out of state, we had the idea to rent a travel trailer and camp on the beach near Port Aransas, but we ended up scrapping that idea and decided to just make a day trip out of it. Needless to say, everyone still had a great time despite a few mishaps, including my wife's Yukon getting stuck in the soft sand and our pop-up shelter falling victim to the wind. We capped off the day by having dinner at a local restaurant before making our way back to San Antonio. The following day, we were once again headed out to the Canyon Lake for an afternoon of wet fun in the sun. We spent the day taking turns being thrown off the tube. My brother's phone decided to get in on the action as well and managed to jump in the water, but unfortunately never came back up. Despite this, we all made it back to shore safe and sound despite being exhausted and perhaps a little sunburned. After the 4th of July weekend, I began working at a new job, and things started winding down in terms of trips and adventures. But I did manage to sneak a peek at a vehicle that just reeks of non-stop fun and adventure, and that is the Ram TRX. Now, if you remember, earlier in the year I had the chance to take a ride in one of these at the Barrett Jackson auction, and were even able to take a few jumps in one with a designated driver. But this time, I was able to get behind the wheel of one myself and see what those 702 horses feel like underneath my foot. No jumps this time. It's still very cool to be able to take a test drive and see how it stacks up to other vehicles that I have driven. The TRX is a dream vehicle, and if I had the money, it would be very hard for me to choose between the TRX and a Rubicon 392. September is now upon us. As much as I love the Ram Power Wagon, the combination of being out of work for 2 months, along with having a new job with a longer commute and costing significant amounts of fuel, this prompted me to once again look at other vehicle options. Actually, it didn't really prompt me. I just generally always on the lookout for what's available in the automotive market. But there's just something I really love about Jeeps in general and their ability to go off-road. The Ram Power Wagon can go off-road, yes, but it is rather large and will not fit down some of the tighter, iconic trails that are still on my bucket list, such as Black Bear Pass in Colorado. I also love convertibles and I love driving a manual transmission, but you can't expect to have all these features along with the utility of a truck that can go off-road, can you? Introducing my brand new 2022 Jeep Gladiator Mojave. Not only was this more fuel efficient and cost way less overall than the Ram Power Wagon, but it has a fun to drive 6-speed manual transmission that I love. It's easier to maneuver both in town and off-road due to its smaller size. It is a convertible with doors and a windshield that fold down or are removable. It still has a lot of the same creature comforts and technology that came with the Power Wagon. Not to mention, it is red, my #1 color on any vehicle. Also, since it's a Jeep Gladiator, it has a truck bed, and being the Mojave model, it comes with remote reservoir Fox shocks that give this thing an incredible ride. The ride is very comparable to the Ram Power Wagons, except that it has much better handling characteristics. I'd say, without really looking for one, this is the quote-unquote perfect vehicle for me. At least for the price range and for the vehicle that doesn't have a V8 in it. But who knows, perhaps a Hemi conversion sometime down the road will solve that problem. I had every intention of building this Jeep Gladiator into an amazing overlanding adventure rig. In its current form, it can already go on many adventures, but there is a lot that I would like to do. But of course, this usually takes money, and in many cases, it can take a lot of money. But with that said, There were some things I could do to modify it in the meantime that would enhance the vehicle without completely breaking the bank. For starters, even though this was a Mojave model, it did not come with a whole lot of options, including the optional LED light package. A cheap and easy fix for this was to simply replace the factory halogen bulbs with a set of LED bulbs. Next up, this Jeep did not come with a tow package, so adding a hitch was going to be an absolute necessity if I planned to tow anything with it, including the M1102 trailer. So I went searching and found a used Mopar receiver hitch assembly. While I was at it, I also found a used rear steel bumper takeoff from a Gladiator Rubicon, which included the factory bed rock rails. Adding these features alone to the rear of the truck greatly enhanced its utility and added protection to some of its vulnerable areas. After that, I went looking for a front bumper because one of the first things anyone should get for an off-roading vehicle is a winch. So I found this front steel bumper takeoff that was from a Rubicon 392. Not only did it come with a factory LED fog lights, but also included was the factory front skid plate as well as a worn winch mounting plate. Although it was a little bit of a pain, I was able to replace the bronze Rubicon 392 tow hooks with my orange Mojave tow hooks, making this bumper look like it came straight from the factory for the Mojave. It is now November 2022. After a couple months of making enhancements to the Mojave, it was time to finally get the Jeep off-road. With some cooler fall weather in place, this made for some great camping weather, and I decided to also test the Mojave's ability to tow the M1102 trailer for a night of somewhat off-the-grid camping at the Schaefer Bend Recreation Area, just east of Marble Falls, Texas. After a frosty night of camping and driving along some of the trails that snake their way along the Colorado River, I worked my way over to Hidden Falls Adventure Park to further test out the Mojave's capabilities. I didn't do anything too crazy, but did take the Mojave through its paces on rocky trails, boulders, and a steep rutted hill climb that I've taken multiple off-road vehicles on over the years. Although I wasn't fully able to truly test out the Mojave's Fox suspension on any high-speed trails, I was very satisfied with the way the Mojave behaves off-road in general. The Fox shocks work amazingly at absorbing bumps, and even with the sway bar still being connected, it articulated well. I can only imagine that its capabilities will be even better once it has a lift and larger tires. But even in its stock form, it is very capable and an enjoyable off-road vehicle. As we neared the end of 2022, we showed you what it was like to drive doorless, topless, and windshieldless in a Jeep truck, and how to do so, and made a non-scientific comparison between various impact drivers. This was just a fun way to round out what I would say was a fantastic year filled with fun and adventure. Well, there you have it. Thanks for coming along on this journey for the Motoring Adventures 2022 Year in Review. I hope this has inspired you to go out and make some adventures of your own. Sometimes it's the places that are just in your backyard that are amazing, wonderful, and inspirational. If you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel and hit the bell to be notified of the next video, and we look forward to seeing you in 2023. We'll see you next time.